Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Kevin Klein. Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. We have a lot to talk about today. Carney and Trump got together once again. We've got some discussion on a premier in Canada, a former premier, who is now having to pay an $18,000 fine for something that happened when they were leaving office. Abhi Khan, who's the leader of the opposition in Manitoba, making some gestures while in the legislature that a lot of people are upset about. And of course, bail that was given to a truck driver who's responsible for the death of a mother and daughter who fled the country to return and then be given bail and house arrest, and he just has to call in once a week to let people know that he's around. Now, last time I checked, there's phones everywhere in the world, but we'll talk about that. I'm joined by my colleagues from the Winnipeg Sun. We have columnist Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba. We have Lawrence Pinsky, KC, also a former human rights adjudicator, and Jeff Currier, who does our Facts Matter and other columns in the Winnipeg Sun on a weekly basis. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. I want to start off with what I think is the biggest story and really speaks to what's happening here in Canada is the gentleman who from India who was here driving transport truck, was in an accident that the RCMP believe he's at fault for, fled the country. He literally fled the country and returned. How he got out is beyond me, but he fled the country, he came back, and we still gave him bail, and he is living at home somewhere in Brampton and only has to call the RCMP once a week. What are your thoughts on this? Royce, I saw you commented about this on X, so tell me your thoughts first.
Well, it makes you wonder, what do you have to do in this country to actually be a flight risk, short of fleeing the country? This is what the person did. He left. For some reason, he came back. He claims it's to face the music on these charges, but I think it kind of raises the question. And the important thing is we're very hard on judges when it comes to bail. But the truth is that judges are responding to the guidance that's given to them by the government. This is something that politicians decide on. This is guidance. These are laws that were created by Justin Trudeau's government. If we want to see changes in the way that bail is handled, that has to happen at the political level. And this is just an excellent case of why we need those changes, I think.
Lawrence, you're an attorney. Should he have gotten this? I mean, should he not be behind bars right now?
Well, without commenting about this particular chap, having not read any of the case or that, Royce is entirely correct. The problem lies in the liberal amendments to bail conditions, essentially, in the criminal code. They've made it almost impossible to keep somebody behind bars. The priority now is release. And that's the mistake. And that's a liberal problem. They haven't fixed it so far. Mr. Carney has a lot of talk about he's going to be strong and tough on crime. There's absolutely zero evidence to support that at this point in time. This wouldn't be that hard an amendment to make to the criminal code. Wouldn't be hard at all. People have been talking about it for a long time. So I think it's time for Mr. Carney to fish or cut bait, amend the criminal code, and keep people who should be behind bars. So
Lawrence has given us a seafood analogy. Jeff, that's normally your thing to do. But do you think this is something that people are talking about at the water coolers and at the Tim Hortons down the street?
I think so. I think when someone who is a clear danger to public safety is allowed back on the street, and there have been a number of documented cases over the last decade or so of people who have been released on bail who've gone on to commit further violent crimes. Even our premier and the leader of the opposition here in Manitoba were commenting on this case this week. Now, I know the Law Society, and this is unusual for politicians, elected officials generally stay away from commenting on court cases and court judgments, which is probably the prudent thing to do. But in this case, both the premier and our leader of opposition here in Manitoba have commented on this case. Now, the Law Society has said that these two leaders are undermining our confidence in the system. Well, I have news for the Law Society that our confidence in the system was undermined a long time before these two spoke up. And the fact is that both Wab Kinew and Abi Khan are saying what the rest of us are thinking about this system.
Yeah, you have to give credit where credit is due. And I think I've heard Wob talk about it a couple of times, and he's staying true to it. He hasn't apologized for it. He just said, well, this is what I'm thinking. I'm not talking about a particular case. I'm talking about all the bail that's happening in general. And I see a lot of people commenting that Wob has to change it. But I don't think it is Wob that changes this, right? And that's what people don't understand. The provincial government can't go in and change the bail policy, Royce. It has to be the federal government.
Well, that's true, but there's always a role for provincial governments, for premiers to put pressure on the federal government to do this. Whether or not that's successful is one thing. Politicians have to respect jurisdiction, but the problem with the comments from the president of the Law Society is that these are elected officials. They're allowed to represent the views of the people. In fact, they should, and we know people are concerned about bail here in Manitoba. So if Wab Kinew wants to talk about this, he should go right ahead and do so. The only thing I would ask is that if you're going to talk about it, don't stop there. Actually take action to make changes. You're the premier. You have the power to do it yourself, or you have the power to put pressure on the federal government. And in terms of Abi Khan, the leader of the opposition can ask questions about whatever he wants to. He doesn't have to go to the president of the Law Society for permission. And this is an example of where there's real problems that need to be addressed. He has every right to ask questions about it.
Now, I know Lawrence, being an attorney, is going to have a very polished answer. So we're going to let Lawrence get the last word in because it's the Law Society. Jeff, I tend to agree with Royce. I don't really care what the Law Society says about this. This is something that should not have happened.
Well, first of all, it's not
right. Lawrence, we're going to give you last word because you're a lawyer. We're going to let Jeff go, and you take last word.
I think we're all in agreement that this man should not have been granted bail because he was clearly a flight risk. Whether he came back to face the music or not, we don't really know. That's his claim, but he shouldn't have been out in the first place. And so, whether or not it's appropriate for politicians to comment on the outcome of court cases, I think that's reasonable. People can disagree about that, but I think we do agree that this man should not have been out.
All right, Lawrence.
All right, thank you. Thanks. I held it back till now. First of all, it's not the Law Society, it's the Bar Association. That's the first thing. Second thing is, that's okay. The second thing is that this is a traditional position that the Bar Association has taken. Politicians shouldn't comment. The reason they take that position is because lawyers are governing themselves, as doctors govern themselves, and registered social workers will govern themselves, etc. So they're worried about encroachment onto the self-governance model. That's why they make those comments consistently when a politician says something. There are other factors as well, but that's the primary one, even though it's never stated that way, or hardly ever stated that way. And there's good reason to be self-governing. So I'll leave that aside for the moment. The question about this chap being granted bail at the time, Section 515 of the Criminal Code says that that's to take place, essentially. That they say that the judge is to make a release order in respect of the offense, with some, except for certain offenses, without conditions, unless the prosecutor shows why. So the onus is on the prosecution.
Okay, but Lawrence, he left the country. How hard would it be for a prosecutor to say, here's the reason why we have to keep him behind bars?
Well, at this point, after he's left, but of course there aren't exit requirements, which is another problem that Canada has, and other countries. Some countries have exit requirements, some don't. People can leave the country without exit issues. That shouldn't be allowed. That should be amended, whether it's to do with people taking children wrongfully away from the other parent, or whether it's this type of situation. There should be exit requirements. There aren't. And the problem lies in the criminal code. Personally, I have no difficulty with a politician saying, we've got a problem here. And for them to bring it up in the legislature, I have no difficulty with that at all. There would be a difficulty with them encroaching on self-governance, because we all know that whatever the government touches, it hardly ever turns out well. So I think there's lots to say about this, but I personally have no problem with either the premier saying something, or the leader of the opposition, or anybody else talking about this. But the issue is not this individual, it's fix bail conditions in the criminal code. It's Mr. Carney.
So we got a lot of comments. I want to make this kind of a really fast round to wrap up this topic, but we got a lot of comments at the winnipegsun.com, and we got some emails and all kinds of stuff about this, where people are saying maybe it's time we start electing judges because they're all appointed by the government, right? The government appoints these judges, they find their friends or whatever it may be, and they're just doing their appointments as patronage appointments, in my opinion. Do we need, Royce, do we need to start electing judges or a crown?
Well, it's a great debate to have. It is the case that an awful lot of judges, they've donated to the party that it's been in power, and that's a big part of actually getting that kind of appointment. And electing judges, there would be some benefit to that. There's some drawback that we see south of the border, but yeah, I don't really have a view on that. In general, I like electing people, but yeah.
All right, Jeff.
Do you want the same people who elect the politicians who we think so highly of also electing our judges?
Valid point. Enough said there. Lawrence, you get the final word on this.
Let me say it bilingually. No, no, no.
Well, something's got to change, and it looks like we got to put that on the federal government. But I mean, Carney apparently has bigger things to deal with. He made a big trip down to Washington, D.C. It actually looked like a love-in at some times. I mean, it must be uncomfortable to sit there while Donald Trump is holding court. I mean, they barely talked about the Canada situation when the media was going on. But Trump did say he feels Carney's going to be happy. He did, poke fun at the idea of a merger or a 51st state and such. Carney pushed back on that. But here we are, yet again, with no tariff deal. We have like nothing. We don't see one on the horizon. We don't see anything happening. Was the trip down there just another waste of our time? Do we have to take a new approach? What do you think, Jeff? Like, I know that you believe Trump is a hard guy to negotiate with. He's not the guy they're negotiating with right now. They're negotiating with the two teams, but maybe we need to send some new people. I don't know.
It's taking longer than we hoped. That's for sure. I think that there's no question that the United States is being obdurate when it comes to this situation, and Mr. Carney has run up against some obstacles that he maybe hadn't foreseen. I think he probably expected to get something done faster than this. When it comes to Donald Trump, he wants to be able to say, "I won." And Mark Carney wants to be able to come home saying, "I won something." And so there's face needs to be saved here on both sides of the 49th parallel. I don't know if that's what the obstacle is, if it's a case of ego or face saving, but it is taking far longer than we'd hoped. Eventually, I guess we'll get something done, but I think we'd all hope that it would have been done a little bit sooner than this.
Lawrence, how did you feel afterwards, knowing that they left there, being friends, and Trump saying that Carney could represent him anytime? And I think that's a great idea. Carney maybe should move to the U.S. then. But he did leave there without any kind of a deal, without any hope. And I think this was the time that all of us, despite Royce, who was sick last week, said, this is the time Carney has to leave the White House with something. And he didn't.
It's like Mr. Carney was at a bar and was being picked up by a cad. That's what it looked like to me. And then, Mr. Trump, this is textbook Trump. And I wish Mr. Carney or somebody in Parliament would actually read what's been written about Mr. Trump. If they have, they either didn't understand it or aren't paying attention. Trump compliments with empty compliments the people he wants to take advantage of. He tells them the most beautiful people in the world, the strongest people in the world, et cetera, et cetera.
Sales technique.
Right. Typical Trump cheap pickup lines. The insanity, the stupidity of Mr. Carney to stand up in Parliament afterwards and say, Mr. Trump said, I'm the toughest negotiator. Look at me. It was embarrassing. It was so naively stupid. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The fact that Mr. Carney sat sat in the Oval Office and talked about trillions of dollars leaving Canada to the United States as a brag is insane. Um, in what should be happening is that supply management should be on the block, not Keystone Pipeline, which is like an obvious situation, should have been approved ages ago. Supply management should be on the line because that's a tax on poor and working class Canadians. And there should be frank negotiations. And Mr. Trump is just taking advantage of Mr. Carney over and over again. And Mr. Carney seems either to not get it or to like it or to be fooling people. It's hard to say. But yeah, people should feel really dirty after what we saw going on in the Oval Office, in my view.
Well, Lawrence, you didn't hold back your feelings, and I think that's fair. I actually watched the press conference, and I felt uncomfortable for Carney. Trump manages a room very well, and I agree. These are cheap pickup lines that they do seem to have worked for Trump in the past, and he's continuing on with those, Royce.
So, Kevin, sorry, I want to agree with you. I felt badly for Carney in the Oval Office, but then when
Yes.
he went to Parliament and bragged about it, look, Trump said I'm the toughest guy in the world. That's when I said, "Oh my God, this man has lost his mind."
Well, there's funny because he also said to a group of reporters as he was walking, he was in Parliament walking down a step of stairs, and some reporters were asking him questions, and he said, "Well, it's funny how when you're all in the White House, it's like, oh, Mr. Trump, President Trump, President Trump, but for me, you all have these faces." I thought, there's some similarities between these two guys. Maybe not in how they acted out, but there's some similarities with their ego, and it's just not working well for Carney. Royce, what are your thoughts?
I don't have no clue why I would feel badly for this guy. He was the guy that had his elbows up. He was going to get the best possible deal. We were going to defeat Trump. We were going to be triumphant. Our trading relationship, as we've known it for 100 years, is over. Blah, 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 blah. And all we see in response to this is a moving of the goalposts and failure to get a deal. This is why Carney was elected. This was it. This was the big issue. He was the credentialed, experienced person that was going to get us through this whole episode, and he hasn't. It's been a failure. And so I always tell people, be resistant to politicians' attempts to change the narrative, to move the goalposts. This is a failure. This is what he was elected for, and we're not getting a deal. And the deal we're going to get isn't ultimately going to be a good one, I don't think. And so hold the prime minister accountable for this. Don't feel sorry for him. Good grief. I wish it was worse for him.
I just felt sorry for him in that room because I thought he was out of his league. It seemed like
Yeah,
he was out of
maybe.
his league for that. That's what it felt like to me, and it felt like Trump was doing what Trump does. He takes over a room. That's his ego is bigger than life, right? He took over that room, and I felt bad as a Canadian because you could sense that we weren't going to be leaving there with anything good at all. Except Carney comes back to Parliament and says he's the toughest negotiator. I agree with Lawrence on that one. You know what? That wasn't necessary, but
And Trump
politicians will always play that card, though.
And Trump sees that. He sees all that. Right
Right.
from the beginning, it was Danielle Smith, it was the Premier of Alberta, who said, we have to negotiate in good faith. We have to be, we have to take unusual steps here. She went down to Mar-a-Lago. She was pilloried for that, criticized. And now Carney in real time has kind of learned that she was right all along. And so, yeah, I'm disappointed. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Canadians agree yet, but they will when the economic consequences come along.
Now, Jeff, I know you have a different feeling on Trump. So what are your thoughts on this?
It's hard to expect to deal with a man who is not going to deal reasonably with you or fairly with you. But Royce's point is a fair one, and we've talked about this before, that this was the basis on which Mark Carney was elected prime minister. Because a mere weeks before the federal election, it was going to be a conservative landslide. And the Canadian electorate turned and pivoted towards Mark Carney because he presented himself as the guy who could get this done, who could get us through this economic crisis, and to get us back on the rails. And Pierre Poilievre failed to make his case with the Canadian electorate that he could be the guy to do that, because he had hammered away on the carbon tax and on Justin Trudeau. And it turns out that he had no more arrows left in his quiver by the time the election rolled around, and it was Mark Carney. Carney was the guy who sold himself, and he has not delivered the goods. And so we'll see how the Canadian electorate feels about this as time goes on. And whether or not there's a budget coming down on November the 4th, whether or not Canadians will pay attention to that and the state of our national finances. Canadians generally don't get too wrapped up in deficits and debts. Not really since the mid-1990s has there been an appetite in this country for reducing the deficit and the national debt. But our national debt is going to be in the neighborhood of $1.5 trillion, which is about 3 times what it was when Paul Martin started to pay down the debt in the mid-1990s. It should be a massive concern to Canadians. That should be another one of the measuring sticks for how Mark Carney plans to govern. So we'll wait for November 4th.
Well, I think November 4th is going to be a very political spin budget because he's talking about investments. But trust me, investments mean spending, period. Governments don't invest. They spend, 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 spend. That's what's going to happen. And to your point, Jeff, the interim parliamentary budget officer has already sounded the alarm. He didn't hold back when he talked about how we're in a very bad situation. Going into more debt, going forward with more debt is not going to be good for the country. Our debt to GDP ratio is failing. I mean, this is a scary time, and most Canadians are not paying attention to that because if you look at a recent poll that was done by Leger for Post Media, one of our partners, they are tracking the Liberals at 44% approval rating against 38% for the Conservatives right now. Gentlemen, I mean, so Carney is still on top.
Yeah, 44% majority government territory.
That's right. That's right. Lawrence, what do you say to that? I mean, right now, Canadians, according to this poll, like Mark Carney.
Well, I would say this. I'm not sure who answers polls, but if there's some degree of accuracy, it's incredibly disappointing. I would hope that Canadians will wake up, perhaps as this trickles through the economy. They will. In my view, Mr. Carney is really, as a leader, the biggest fraud almost in how he got elected. I don't recall anyone being so opposite in terms of how they govern as opposed to what they ran on as he has been. And I don't believe that if Mr. Poilievre had been the prime minister, had he won, I don't think we'd be in the same position. Mr. Trump likes strong people. He fears them. He deals with them in a different way. It's the weak he takes advantage of. And that's really what we see. So it is fair to say, I as I said, I felt badly seeing him being just stripped apart on wokeism, on the economy, on all sorts of things in the Oval Office on a human sort of level. But he absolutely earned every moment of that based on how he ran versus how he governs. And you can bet your bottom dollar that on November 4th, we're going to see more of the same, more hide the bean under the rubric of investment when in fact it's spending, Kevin, as you said. And Canada's in big trouble. It will trickle down. Manitoba particularly is even worse trouble. And I hope that Canadians wake up before it's too late. And it's happening in foreign policy, on domestic policy, economic policy, criminal policy, health policy. I'd like a win for Canada.
Yeah.
I really would.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, if you're going to win in those situations, and we've learned this from our parents. I mean, if you want to use hockey analogies, you can use a hockey analogy. You have to fight fire with fire. If it's a hard-hitting game, you got to be hitting just as hard back, right? That's how we all live. You got to fight fire with fire, and we have not done that in who we elected. Because I think you're right. Trump didn't want to deal with somebody like Poilievre, who could probably stand toe-to-toe to him for a while.
Oh, wait a second. Hang on a second now, because when it was the cry elbows up and we instituted retaliatory tariffs, Kevin, you were one of the people who were opposed to those retaliatory tariffs.
I still am.
That's fighting fire with fire.
No, it's not. It's not fighting fire at all.
So how do you fight? What is your view of fighting fire with fire? What would be appropriate in this
I mean,
case?
if I you want to fight fire with fire, take away the break that they get on oil and gas. Take away that. Take away some of the other breaks that we give to the Americans for energy and so on. That's fighting fire with fire. If you could put tariffs on American products coming in, that's nothing more than just hurting Canadians, and we found that out. The parliamentary budget officer once again noted that makes life more expensive for us in Canada. You're punishing Canadians by putting tariffs on American products because the Liberal government for the last 10 years chased businesses out of Canada. We can't sustain ourselves. We have to get products from everywhere. We have to get products from all around the world. We don't have a lot of manufacturing that goes on here. So when they put tariffs on fruits and vegetables and all that, that's not fighting fire with fire. I see that as a loss.
It's also not fighting intelligently. The first thing you do is you go down to the United States. You don't start firing inside the same canoe. The first thing you do is you go down there and say, we're going to get rid of supply management. We're going to be your strongest, best ally, but you have to reciprocate. You're going to win Wisconsin. You're going to win Minnesota. That's what you do. And only if they don't play ball at that point, that's when you start doing what Kevin is talking about and actually punishing them. The reality is our geography mandates that we be aligned with the United States. And you have to give Mr. Trump a win where he needs it, which is electorally. And that means saying end of supply management. It means Keystone Pipeline. It means development and growth. It means having their back and our own back on immigration policy, on crime. It means getting more aligned, not less aligned, and not firing inside the canoe at ourselves. Kevin's right.
Yeah, thank you. Jeff?
I don't disagree that I've never been a fan of tariffs anyway on either side of the border. And so your point's a fair one, Kevin, and that we have to be aggressive. I don't know what Pierre Poilievre would have done in this case because he hasn't really said. I don't know if he would have been any more successful. All we've heard from him is criticism of the prime minister, which is fair, but I haven't heard any alternatives. I haven't heard him say, "Here's what I would have done."
That's not true. That's not true, Jeff. He's talked entirely about, for example, ending capital gains tax as long as you reinvest in the economy. He's had a bunch of policies about building the Canadian economy in the face of Mr. Trump, and he shows strength and power. That's what Trump likes, and that's what Canada needs.
Yeah, I don't. If it's Pierre Poilievre in the Oval Office last week, what is different today?
Well, it's
I don't know.
It's everything leading up to it. You don't just go in naked there, as Mr. Carney does, and then brag about the cheap pickup lines that he's hearing from Mr. Trump. You prepare in advance. You show strength from the beginning. Follow what Roy Cohn, who actually is the mentor for Mr. Trump, what he said and did. And then you'll see how to deal with this guy. And that's how you deal with it.
I want to get Royce in on this one. Royce, what are your thoughts on the conversation right now?
Well, I think one of the differences is we haven't seen any movement on infrastructure issues. We've seen talk, but this week we heard about a potential pipeline that Premier of Alberta wants to build through British Columbia. The Premier of BC said there's no way that's going to happen. It's going to be very difficult to do that. The federal government could step in. It looks like they're not going to do that. Now, Trump sees that. They know that we're in a weak negotiating position. If we had the ability to export our products to places other than the US, this would be potentially a very different conversation. So if we're still shooting our own feet off up here in Canada, we can't meet our own needs. We can't act in our own best interest. Don't expect Trump to negotiate with us in good faith. He knows that we're in a weakened position. And that's something where I could have seen there would have been a difference with Poilievre in office. There should have been stronger signals that these projects were moving forward. And that hasn't been the case under Carney.
Well, we just saw a poll that was done by the Angus Reid Institute in BC and across Canada saying that most Canadians favor a pipeline. It seems like the Premier of BC is the only one that doesn't favor a pipeline. I think that's almost what the poll results should have said because he does seem to be very against the pipeline. But I'm going to throw in Wab Kinew. I mean, everyone seems to like Wab Kinew because he's suave and debonair when he's on camera and he knows how to play the media very, very well. excellent statesman. But I mean, he didn't sign on the MOU to have a pipeline go through Manitoba to at least get it to the Great Lakes so that it could go through the St. Lawrence Seaway if it had to. These are things that we should have done. We've talked about this since March. We've talked about opening up trade, provincial trade. I hear from businesses that want to do provincial trade, it is still impossible for them to move their products. You know, the Canadian government says they've done everything they can do. Well, you're the adult in the room. You have to make the premiers get along.
Yeah, and we don't need a pipeline. We need 10 pipelines,
Yeah.
and we needed them 10 years ago. The thing to keep in mind with EB and Canoe is these are NDP politicians. They have to serve, the people of their province, but they also have to worry about their own party, their own supporters. And so there's a balancing act. People concerned about climate change that are opposed to pipelines that think we should leave our natural resources in the ground forever. That's a real constituency for these politicians, and it's too bad. It hurts it makes it impossible for them to rise to the occasion, which is the need to build this infrastructure for Canadians as a whole.
Yeah, there is that large issue of interprovincial trade barriers, and Brian Pallister tried to make that an issue when he was premier, and he tried to take that to the national stage repeatedly and got nowhere with it. I don't know why there is a reluctance on our part that it's easier for the province of British Columbia to trade with Oregon than it is with Alberta.
Coming from a guy who was a minister in the provincial government and sat on city council as a politician for a very short time, I like to refer to myself sometimes as a reoccurring or a recovering politician. We lost Jeff. We'll probably try to sign him back in, but he makes a pretty valid point that we aren't really seeing or hearing from our premiers anything, right? This is something that should have been done, could have been done, and hasn't been done. And I think we're sending the wrong message. But Canadians don't seem to be picking up on it when you go back to the Leger poll and say 44% like the Liberals.
I want to step back for a second, say this, that Premier Eby, like our NDP governments here for many years, are unfortunately evidence the ruination of the economy. And they've done it consistently for many, many years. Premier Dewar in Manitoba was an exception. Whether he was a true NDP or not is a different question. I do want to, though, to say that for Wob Canoe in Manitoba, on the issue of the pipeline, what he said was, we have to make sure that Indigenous people are consulted in advance, not after the fact. And in light of Supreme Court rulings, I agree with that. But then the next part is, get to the table. You've been in government for 2 years. Get that done immediately, because those pipelines should be going through. And Royce is right. We're talking, there should be 10 or more pipelines, and they should be going in different directions across the country. And even when you look at CO Silica, this will be a nice sort of a liaison into another topic.
Right.
Or punish the people who deserve punishment, for sure. But get the resource out of the ground. There's $7 million of silica sands sitting on top of the ground, waiting to be exported. There's more that could be done. We're talking a multi-billion-dollar industry employing thousands of people. And Mr. Canoe uses it as a hammer to hit his political opposition instead of employing Manitobans and building our economy. And that crass political opportunism is a huge problem.
But let's talk about that, because that is one of the topics that we mentioned off the top that I wanted to speak about. And that's recently there was an investigation into the involvement of a couple of ministers and the premier when it came to approving CO Silica. The allegations were that they tried to push it through after they had lost the election during the transfer of power. I was the environment minister of the day. And I was the one who came out and fought back and told the media, yeah, they did try to do this. And I thought that was wrong. I thought that was the wrong process to do. I stand by that today. I know a lot of people in some conservative circles were very angry with me and still are. But you know what? Sorry, integrity over party. That's the reality here. But you're right. CO Silica is a big project. But instead of talking about how do we get the billions of dollars that are sitting underground. We're talking about the fact that, Wab Kinew went on national TV, him back on the CBC where he used to work, talking about how the first province in the history to fine a former premier. So Heather Stephenson, the former premier, got fined $18,000. A former minister, Cliff Cullen, got fined, and a sitting member of the legislature also got fined, and Jeff Warden. So, I want to talk to Royce about this first as a political science professor. What kind of a precedent does this send?
Well, I mean, it was ill-advised. What happened is that this got stretched over the summer break because the NDP wanted to have the opportunity to keep talking about it, but they hit the deadline and they voted, and they imposed the fine, and the PCs were voted with that as well. And so this is, I think it was ill-advised. It's actually kind of hurt the potential for this net resource to be developed, which is very, very unfortunate. I mean, there's environmental concerns, there's concerns about Indigenous consultation. We should address those, but we know how to get this sand out of the ground safely. And I think this whole thing, the real concern here is that it's made it harder for us to get to the point where this development can actually happen. There's lots of money, there's lots of good jobs. I didn't like to see the Premier of Manitoba go on a national show on the CBC and use the opportunity to beat up the Manitoba PC party. I think the Premier should be advocating for Manitobans and not using national platforms to fight his own battles here in Manitoba. I think that's unfortunate, to be honest.
I agree 100%. The fact of the matter is that the silica sand that's in Manitoba could result in us being a have province all by itself. From experts that I've spoken to have said there's enough silica sand here to make us like the big countries with oil, like on top of the oil we already have. So I agree. I don't think he should have played it as a political game, and he really did.
Yeah, when your opponent is defeating them, your opponents are defeating themselves. Let them. I don't think it was necessary for the Premier to expand on this. A more statesman-like statement would have been, well, this is the judgment of the court of our legislature, right? This is the judgment that's been imposed. We think it's appropriate, and we're going to move on. We're going to take another look at this project because we think it could benefit Manitobans. I'd have been much happier to hear something like that from the Premier, because this, in political terms, as we all know, they call it a win, but it's a cheap win.
Yeah.
It's you're kicking a party that is already in disarray, that is already down in the polls. It was really not necessary. It was an unnecessary whack at an opponent who is already down.
My point, I guess, is to say this: Manitoba is in deep economic trouble. Kevin is entirely right. The people I've spoken to say that there are billions and billions of dollars without real significant or really any environmental damage in terms of extracting the silica. There already, as I said, is millions of dollars on top of the ground. There's billions of dollars underneath. And this could change our fortunes considerably. We're talking about employing our engineers. We're talking about creating a a glass plant in Manitoba. We're talking about extracting the resource that's required worldwide. I don't know if people know, there's apparently a shortage of sand in the world. And this is a very, very high quality type of sand that's necessary in computer chips and necessary in all high tech. This is huge for Manitoba potentially. Mr. Kinew has been in power, it's 2 years-ish now. And my God, build the economy. Our healthcare is in a disaster. Streets are a problem, on and on and on. And here we're sitting on something that should be developed, that should be employing Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. And instead, he continues to use this as a cudgel. Use it a few times as a cudgel, move on, get the job done. That's your job, Premier.
I really believe exactly what you said, Lawrence. I mean, he should have just let it go and dealt with it, got the fines out of the way. That's great. Okay, now we've done that. It's been done in the legislature, as Jeff said, kind of the legislative court of opinion, or the votes that they held in the legislature had passed the fines down to these individuals. But we are missing a point here that I want to hear from Royce about is that, in my opinion, as somebody who has been in politics and been there, the whole problem with CO silica is it became a political hot potato. Politicians, even at the small council levels in smaller communities, all of a sudden were talking like they were experts on getting silica sand out of the ground. And it became this monster. It became this evil project, and it became bigger than what people really think or thought it was at first. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. And I think that's the problem with politics, right? So now you had, because during that time you would have had the NDP and them talking about how, well, silica sand's going to ruin the environment, everybody's going to die, it's going to be terrible, this is going to happen, this is on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But isn't that the problem with politics? Like we get into the legislatures or we get into council or at the federal level parliament, Royce, and that's all we do is we don't spend time thinking about what's best for the province or the country or the city. We spend time thinking about how do we beat up our opponent.
Yeah, yeah, and this was all happening in the lead up to a provincial election. So the impulse was for politicians to politicize things as much as possible. The hope is that, given what's happened since with the election of Trump, with the raising of these big concerns about how we need these projects, we need this infrastructure, that politicians would rise to the occasion. I'm not really sure we're seeing that. You know, when Brian Pallister was first elected as premier, these NDP politicians were just attacking him right away, and I was kind of like, well, he just won the election. Like, at least give him a chance. Like, give me a break. I had the same attitude towards this NDP government, towards Wab Kinew. He won the election, give him a chance. But now we're 2 years in, and yeah, I think we need to start asking, okay, where's the beef? Where's the statesmanship? Where's the advocacy for these projects that are actually going to matter? The campaign's over. It's time to start thinking more about governing than campaigning, and I think we need to start asking that of this government more than we have in the past.
Jeff
Yeah,
Currier
Royce, I
wrote a
think,
column on that,
yeah,
the Facts Matter column on that, Jeff.
yeah, and I think it's important. If Wab Kinew says he wants to turn us into a half province, which to me is, I mean, I've never heard that from any Manitoba premier. I was delighted to hear that. It's okay. So as Royce says, where's the beef? If it's not going to be a pipeline, if it's not going to be silica sand, and I think that project is deader than disco. I don't think there's any way that Wab Kinew is ever going to approve that project at this point because of the politics that have been attached to it and all the things you just pointed out, Kevin. So if it's not going to be those things to grow our economy and to turn us into a half province, what's it going to be? What is his vision then? And he hasn't articulated that.
Well, Jeff, now I want to quote the Bee Gees. I need you to show me how deep is your silica. And it's not very deep, and there really is no environmental catastrophe. You're right, Kevin. Certain politicians catastrophize things. I think Al Gore said by now we're all supposed to be either frozen or on fire or both. His predictions were wrong. It's wrong after wrong after wrong. But meanwhile, this is an easy yes. I do agree with you, Jeff, that unfortunately this project at this point in time is a long way to go. And I hope CO Silica figures out the right path to get it done, because Manitoba, and in fact Canada, needs this project to be done. So I really hope that we get there.
I would say this, Royce. This is a project that Trump would die to have happen. Like, he wants to bring all the chip building back to America. Oh, we're going to build our chips here. We're going to bring them back to this country. Well, you need silica sand to do that, my friend, and we have it. And here's the biggest problem that I have with the media. Well, I always have problems with the media, and I am in the media, but on the media and all politicians, they've already done it. In Manitoba, they've drilled the holes. They've taken silica sand out. It didn't magically appear. Lawrence is talking about piles of it sitting on the ground, and that's right. And it's worth millions of dollars to all of us. Wow. They've already done that, and nothing has happened. So let's calm down here a little bit and let science lead us. We have this problem now where we disagree with science. If they've already done it, nothing bad has happened. Let's talk about how we can proceed cautiously, take our time, but let's get the thing moving. And that is my problem with politicians. And to Jeff's point, yeah, it might be deader than disco, although, we just talked about the Bee Gees,
Yeah.
and I talk, I like disco still, but Royce, I mean, here's the problem with politicians again. The facts of the matter are very clear. They've drilled holes. They've taken silica sand out. And you know what? The province is still there.
Yeah. Yeah, I fear that Jeff is right. I fear the project is dead, but I hope not. And the only thing to say about that is Wab Kinew is still popular. He's got popularity. He commands that government. He can get his way. And if he decides that this is going to happen, that's something that he can actually put some effort. That's something that he can spend some of his political capital on, something that's going to benefit Manitobans and Canadians for generations to come. And so I hope this attracts his attention.
Or do we have another company that leaves Manitoba and spreads the word, don't go to Manitoba. They don't want business there.
Wow, very valid point. Very valid point. And I guess, it's the investment too, right? Because for silica sand to grow to the capacity that we need it to grow to, and there was a company from Europe that was going to build a factory that was going to employ hundreds of people, high-paying jobs, not low-paying jobs, high-paying jobs to make this work. And then you've got the transportation industry that would win from that. You have local communities that win. You have small businesses that win, all of it being stopped because of politics. And I really think that that's the problem we have with elected officials at all three levels of government. And I'm not trying to say they're bad people, but you need to stop and you need to get the emotion out of your decision making, because the reality and the facts are you've already done the process. You've already drilled more than one hole. You've already taken silica sand out, and everybody is okay. This is something that we have to change in Canadian politics at all levels, and we're not doing that. I want to stay on the province, get off Seal Silica for a couple of seconds, because we're almost done here, and talk about, we'll stay in Manitoba. We've talked about EB, and I mean, I like what Daniel Smith is doing and Scott Moe. They're trying to promote things. They're working at it. But here in Manitoba, we've got a problem with our legislature where Kinew is very popular and he doesn't seem to want to do anything, but our opposition is not strong. And we've talked about this. And then recently we had Abi Khan. There's a column by a high school student in the Winnipeg Sun. It was in the Friday edition. You can go to winnipegsun.com and read it. It's by, I think it's Jerry or Gary Cowlson. And he wrote about how Abi Khan did not support the Jewish community on October 7th, was nowhere to be seen. And then we hear about all the fire that's been burning because Abi Khan, while sitting in the legislature, while the Minister of Education, she was speaking, and he was making this kind of a motion and that kind of a motion. I mean, really, how do we expect to get the NDP to do anything when we have an opposition that's not a threat?
Well, oh, sorry. Do you want to go, Royce?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Or Jeff? So I think that I read Gary's column. You should know the premier doesn't get off either. He equivocates. At least he wrote something, but he equivocated, and which itself is perhaps even more problematic. I think the PCs in Manitoba need to understand that the NDP is already on the ground knocking on doors in Tuxedo. They're already starting. And they have the PCs in Manitoba have to get their act together. It's just vitally critical if Manitoba is going to grow and have a chance at some sort of economic prosperity, some chance at a better healthcare system, which is more messed up than under Ms. Stevenson's government, or Stephenson's rather. Crime is still a problem in the downtown and in various locations throughout Manitoba. And PCs have to get it together. They cannot, as I think Jeff would say, shoot or score on themselves, score on their own nets, and that's what they're doing. They have to be way more organized. I believe I think their policy or their convention rather, their AGM is coming up in November. They better use that to kick off something a lot stronger, a lot smarter. That's what they've got to do. I did note that on a labor issue, they made some really good points on that. They made some good points on the healthcare file, but then we have this. I don't think it's that. I should say this too. I don't know that it's that critical in the big picture. I don't think people will remember this.
Oh, I disagree.
Yeah, you may, and that's okay.
But as a politician, like you do something like that as a politician, they're gonna make you're gonna pay for that for a long time. The media is gonna remember it. And he of course came out immediately, apologized. Oh, I was frustrated. That's not how an intelligent leader acts in the legislature. There were kids in there. I mean, the gallery is normally full during question period. You got to be careful.
I'm not saying that's not true, but I don't see this as a major issue. It's a momentary issue. I think it's a tempest in a teapot. But over on the big picture, organization and readiness, because I think Mr. Canoe will go early. He's never been more popular than he is now. Whether it's 2.5 or 3 years, he will go early, and the PCs have to get their act together, or they won't be contenders. That's simple.
Jeff, at the start of the show, before we started taping, you had said you didn't think anyone would talk about this either.
Yeah, maybe they will. I tend to think that you both have some accuracy in what you're saying. Sometimes these things will hang on. I think something like this will resonate with NDP voters longer than it would potential swing voters. But I'm more concerned about whether, as Lawrence talked about, the organizational aspect of the PCs right now. They just, if an election was called next week, next month, next year, would they be ready? Right now, it doesn't appear as though they would be. I don't know that they're financially in a position to run an election campaign right now. I don't know if they've got a strong enough team. If Abi Khan has a strong enough team, if he has made his mark as leader of the party to this point, I don't know if we can answer yes to any of those questions. So I agree with Lawrence. I think Wob will probably go early. There is precedent for it. Brian Pallister did it unnecessarily under the pretext of not wanting to interfere with Manitoba 150, which was a nothing burger for most Manitobans anyway.
Yeah.
But he was riding high in the polls and went ahead and had that election. And I think Wob Canoe will probably do something similar. And sometimes these things don't. For example, nobody's talking about Nahanni Fontaine right now.
No,
that kind of came and went.
Yep.
And so these sort of minor political things tend to kind of come and go. But can you deliver the goods come election time? What do you got for me, Hobby? What are you gonna sell to Manitobans that Wob Canoe isn't selling?
But the NDP played that whole Nahanni Fontaine and Bernadette Smith thing, and now the Abi Khan thing like a fiddle. I'm going to be very blunt here. I mean, you had the NDP immediately come out and criticize Abi Khan for those actions, which I do. But I mean, they went to, in a time when political violence is stronger than ever in Manitoba because, Bernadette Smith's office has been vandalized and Nahanni Fontaine's office has been vandalized. But nobody, not one media, nobody is talking about the fact they're both in neighborhoods where that happens on a daily basis. Businesses have their windows broken all the time in the neighborhoods they're in. Bernadette Smith's office is in an area that is one of the areas in Canada that has the most fires across Canada. I mean, these are facts, but the NDP spun it, turned it around, and all of a sudden it became political violence. They have no proof of it. Absolutely no proof that it's political violence, but they came out and they said that. And that, I think, is something that the Conservatives should be doing, is going back saying, hey, listen, what you just said, Jeff, let's get back to this. We have a chief now, the chief of Peguis, saying that the Indigenous Child and Family Services needs to be, looked at, needs to be reviewed. We need to have outside sources taking a look at it. Nahanni Fontaine, Wob Canoe, they're not saying anything, and the PCs are silent on that. And Royce, isn't that how you win as the opposition? Aren't you supposed to act like the government in waiting?
Yeah. The truth of the matter is that the atmosphere in the Manitoba legislature is pretty horrendous, and that comes from both sides of the House, and it could be addressed better than it is. I think that, PCs are held to a different standard by the media here in Manitoba. To be honest, like I can point to lots of examples where the premier is saying things that are very out of the ordinary for legislatures in this country, including the House of Commons. They're not really reported upon, but Abi Khan makes a sign of exasperation, and all of a sudden it becomes a big deal. I just think that Khan needs to kind of remember that this is the standard. It's whether or not it's fair is another issue, but he's going to be held to this standard, and he needs to keep that in mind moving forward. I actually disagree with you, Kevin. I think the PC caucus actually is a good opposition. Like in question period, they really get under the minister's skin. They get under Canute's skin pretty quickly. There's really no need for this kind of stuff that I think, as you rightly point out, just becomes a distraction from the issues that matter.
Well, I mean, we did go after in the Winnipeg Sun. We went after Wab Kinew when he made the comment about protesters, calling them goofballs. And yeah, he does act a certain way. He loses his cool sometimes in the legislature, which I do agree with. But I just don't see a future right now. I don't see, it from the NDP. I don't have a lot of hope for Manitoba. I love it here. I love being in Winnipeg. But none of these politicians from a municipal level up are giving me any hope for the future right now, and I hope that changes. Listen, we're out of time. That was a good discussion this week. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I look forward to reading your columns at winnipegsun.com. As normal at this part of the show, I need to remind Lawrence that his column is due so that he can get to it and get writing it. But we'll look forward to seeing Royce's and Jeff Currier's over the weekend, and Lawrence's as well. So guys, have a great Thanksgiving long weekend. So happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for joining me.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegssun.com for more.